Hello boys and girls, Adam Nicholas here for WhatCulture Wrestling. Now before we get started, I just want to prepare you for the sentiment because you're going to be hearing it quite a lot over the next few weeks as these end of year lists all start to come at you thick and fast from all different kinds of media. Professional wrestling in 2018 was absolutely fucking bananas. Things have changed so drastically that names like Adam Cole, Ricochet, things like Daniel Bryan, ever returning from injury, turning heel and being the WWE champion are now very much on the table in a time previous which they wouldn't have even been conceivable. In fact, come to think of it, pretty much nothing is off the table in 2018. WWE have always marketed that anything can happen with their product. But in 2018, I didn't realise that meant that anything would bloody happen. And with that in mind, I'm Adam Nicholas, and these are 15 matches you won't believe happened in 2018. Number 15, Kenny Omega versus Chris Jericho, Wrestle Kingdom 12. Long before Chris Jericho became a long pants wearing monster heel in New Japan, who also just so happens to be their Intercontinental Champion right about now, few believed he could reach the elite standards that was set by Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom just 1 year prior. But then again, when have the haters ever stopped Chris Jericho before? The answer, of course, is never, and it was exactly the same situation here. Jericho kicked down the door of opportunity and found himself at Wrestle Kingdom, New Japan's biggest show of the year, taking on Kenny Omega. Now, before the show had even started, it was noted how big of an impact Jericho had actually had on both ticket sales and New Japan World subscriptions. So confirmed as a draw before the pay-per-view even started, by the time the match finished with Kenny Omega, Jericho was once again being praised for his superb in-ring work. No surprises there, but even Dave Meltzer couldn't believe he was awarding 5 stars for the match he just had with Kenny Omega. Number 14, Johnny Slaughter in Major Victory versus Ed Balls and Joey SARTAIN, South Legacy Wrestling. During his time in power in the UK, former Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls could have probably been compared to one Eric Bischoff, often having answers for questions he had no answer to at all. Outside of politics, however, he's often best remembered for a Twitter cock-up and, of course, his comical run on Strictly Come Dancing, the latter of which landed him a role on BBC's Travels in Trumpland. In the midst of his attempts to patronise Trump supporters and compare the American divide to that of the Brexit saga back in the UK, Balls found himself immersed in the world of wrestling, where he was playing a foreign heel in a leotard at a Southern Legacy wrestling show. Now, as you can imagine, this was, to be fair, a pile of shit. It wasn't really anything, it was just Ed Balls playing up to a bunch of cameras for his documentary, pulling over the top facial expressions, just generally being condescending to the art of wrestling. However, given the fact that the Munford Community Centre where this was being filmed was barely even half full, well, I don't think we're going to be getting a phone call from Vince McMahon anytime soon. Number 13, Matt Riddle versus Minoru Suzuki, Matt Riddle's Bloodsport. After a late cancellation by Low Key, Matt Riddle's Bloodsport, which was taking place over WrestleMania weekend, was suddenly without a headliner and in desperate need of a suitable replacement to face Riddle in the main event. Luckily for the Super King of Bros, however, Minoru Suzuki, aka the Supreme King of kicking the out of anything and anyone, stepped up to the plate, and the two went to war. Punching, kicking, snatching, clutching, this was about as real as a wrestling match can get without somebody dying. Riddle and Suzuki went to absolute war with one another, tore each other apart in a ring with no ropes. This was how wrestling used to be, and yet somehow it felt like nobody had ever seen this before. The clash between these two auras proved to be fantastic, and it was one of the most celebrated matches over a stacked weekend in New Orleans. Brilliant in its simplicity, a glorious and grisly exhibition of violent submissions and brutal strikes. Number 12, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon versus Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey, WrestleMania 34. Don't lie about this, admit it. When you saw Ronda Rousey pointing at that sign and she was standing at the Royal Rumble, big smile on her face, pointing at the sign with a leather jacket 3 sizes too big for her, you thought exactly the same thing that I thought. This is a terrible mistake. Ronda Rousey's debut wasn't just the best match WWE had this year, it was also the most on-brand contest the company have had all year as well, in terms of sports entertainment. And that's what WWE are all about. The amount of planning, the sheer scale of the match, the execution, everything about this was fantastic. Ronda performed magnificently. Stephanie McMahon was unselfish. Triple H, for one hot minute, was that damn good again. And Kurt Angle, well, he didn't break anything. And that that was really good also. Number 11, FSCW 30-man Rumble, Florida SUPERCON. Capitalizing on the capitulation of beloved brand Toys R Us, FSCW decided to send out a local wrestler dressed as Jeffrey the Giraffe, of course the mascot for Toys R Us, who seemingly decided he was going to turn his life around by destroying everything and everyone who got in his path in the 30-man Rumble and presumably win the damn thing. But alas, it really wasn't going to be his year. Sadly, it would be Attitude Era Gangrel who would put the final nail in the coffin of Jeffrey's fairy tale, using his blood rival Amazon Prime to sign, seal and deliver his demise. Calling from an announcer's iPhone, Gangrel ordered a parcel to be delivered during the match, which he then used to wallop the long-haired lunatic over the top rope and into redundancy for the second time this year. Number 10, the greatest Royal Rumble. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the term banter, but to be honest, there is literally no other word to describe this and do it justice. This was a banter match on a banter show that would only be topped by its absolute banter of a Saudi Arabian sequel, but more on that one in just a little bit. The greatest Royal Rumble was the biggest Royal Rumble in WWE history. We had Daniel Bryan lasting 76 minutes in a 50-man muddle. We had the unknown Hiroki Sumi, who was allegedly only there because the Saudi Arabian chaps had actually asked for Yokozuna to appear, who of course is dead. And then on top of that, we had Braun Strowman winning the match and a great big green belt that we'd never see on WWE TV ever again. However, with great banter comes great stupidity, and were it not for this pay-per-view, we would not have had Titus O'Neil tripping and sliding down the ramp faster than, well, Adam Wilborn sliding into Titus O'Neil's DMs, actually. Titus, well slide! Number 9, Jerry Lawler versus Joey Ryan, WRESTLECON Super Show. Acutely understanding how to do comedy wrestling really goddamn well, Joey Ryan's matches are often amongst the most talked about and most shared within the online wrestling community for one simple reason. He is so good at coming up with unique and innovative ways to showcase his super-powered schlong. In this particular match against one Jerry the King Lawler, Ryan's X-Factor isn't just in his powerful pecker, but also in his love letter to one of Lawler's biggest rivals, Andy Kaufman. Encapsulating everything about the scene from 1999's Man on the Moon, Lawler shot fire into the microphone before literally doing so towards Joey Ryan's fireproof plums. The Pyromania would cost King the match via disqualification, but the spot itself earned the pair plaudits and praise for their creativity, itself a rather fitting tribute to the Lawler-Kaufman vintage. Number 8, Nick Aldis versus Cody, All In. Question, who is the current NWA World's Heavyweight Champion? If you said Cody, then you'd be wrong, and that's not your fault. That is just something that proves my point entirely. The last man to make you care about that belt is Cody. Nevertheless, care we did. The American Nightmare and Nick Aldis managed to put on an NWA-style match with an NWA-style build that had an NWA-style finish and managed to evoke passionate cheers from an NWA-style crowd. And to be honest, as a wrestling match, this was a magnificent piece of work. For just one night only, Cody managed to elevate the belt to the level where it used to be when his father battled for it so proudly against the likes of Ric Flair and Harley Race. Not only that, but he also managed to achieve some history with his dad as well, becoming the first ever father and son pairing to have both held the 10 pounds of gold. Number 7, Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Kazuchika Okada, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Destruction in Kobe. While the booking and execution of Kenny Omega's 2018 IWGP Heavyweight Championship reign might not have been quite right this year, one thing that has been right in New Japan in 2018 is the story between Kazuchika Okada and Hiroshi Tanahashi. As Okada's life fell to pieces in the wake of his defeat to Kenny Omega at Dominion, losing his title, Tanahashi's was just getting restarted, and he managed to overcome the odds and a spot of PTSD in his match against Minoru Suzuki to not only beat the Suzuki Gun leader, but overall win the tournament and become the man who could face Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. After seeing the aces back for so long, Tanahashi finally proved it, winning the G1 climax and inching closer to regaining his self-respect. And it was a self-respect that he finally take back at Destruction in Kobe when Tanahashi managed to defeat Kazuchika Okada, a man who'd humbled him earlier on during Okada's title defense, and it meant that Tanahashi kept on to his title shot and would face Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom. Number 6, 40-man Battle Royal, WAW September to Remember 2. World Association Wrestling, the Norwich-based wrestling company ran by the famous Knight family, aka Paige's mum and dad, managed to get the main event of their pay-per-view, September to Remember 2, to go viral in the UK after the unofficial in-ring debut of former Norwich City footballer Grant Holt. Not only that, but Holt actually won the Battle Royale, much to the delight of the Norwich faithful, and also delivered a decent dropkick and managed to skin the cat during the match. The whole thing was done to build to a tag match at Fightmare 3 in 2019, where Grant Holt is set to team up with the UK Hooligans, aka Page's brothers. Number 5, Dolph Ziggler versus Shane McMahon, WWE Crown Jewel. Shane McMahon is the best in the world. Moving on. Number 4, D-Generation X versus the Brothers of Destruction, WWE Crown Jewel. Well, where do we start with this one? The pay-per-view somehow going ahead despite the alleged murder of a journalist. That happened. Shawn Michaels coming out of retirement. That happened. Triple H tearing his pec muscle. That happened. HBK accidentally pulling off Kane's mask and wig. That happened. Again, Kane's mask and wig falling off. That happened. One last time, the mayor of Knox County's wig and mask fell off. That happened. Number 3, David Arquette versus Nick Gage, Joey Janela's LA Confidential. Is it that controversial to suggest that a death match between the terrifying Nick Gage and former Hollywood actor and yes, ex-WCW World Heavyweight Champion David Arquette shouldn't have really been taking place in the first place? Probably not, to be honest, but admittedly, none of us made a fuss when we saw this match was first advertised. All we did was pop our socks off, because that is what Joey Janela seems to be able to do time and time again with his brilliant and bizarre matchmaking. Gage and Arquette went to battle in a predictably brutal and bloody brawl, and while Arquette may have some acting experience to boot, it's fair to say there was no hiding how much of a toll this Crimson War was taking on his body, and a near-fatal botched light tube spot proved to be the pick of a not-so-glamorous litter. Yet through his unshakable determination to improve and his desperation for acceptance from the fans, David Arquette has managed to make himself somewhat of a draw in 2018, a feat that actual wrestling company WCW couldn't achieve when he was twice as young and thrice as famous. Number 2, Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair, Survivor Series. The combination of Becky Lynch's overnight success and a subsequent injury resulted in an incredible match being booked at Survivor Series with just 5 days' notice. Charlotte Flair stepped in to replace the man against Ronda Rousey, and as you can imagine, expectations were fairly high. After Charlotte ended Asuka's undefeated streak at WrestleMania 34, this match, Charlotte versus Ronda Rousey, was the match that fans and journalists alike were predicting was going to headline WrestleMania 35. That is, until Becky Lynch decided to emerge from the shadows and surpass the Queen, surpass the baddest woman on the planet, and to be quite perfectly honest, every other female and male superstar on the main roster. Nevertheless, this was still a mouth-watering prospect, and one that did not disappoint. It did leave room for rematches. Ronda got the DQ victory after a non-finish and a brutal post-match beatdown from Charlotte, but these two still managed to put together a brilliant, nasty, sprint-like fight that managed to perfectly sum up the clashing of their two styles. And number 1, Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Bryan, WWE Survivor Series. The AJ Styles and Brock Lesnar sequel was something the fans were very keen to see indeed. Their match a year prior had probably been one of Brock's best matches, and AJ Styles was in need of a big performance. At the same time, 1 year prior, Daniel Bryan was still trying to change the minds of the WWE medical staff, get himself cleared, and return to the wrestling ring once again. And a match with Brock Lesnar? Poof! I don't think so. You could barely imagine doing that on WWE 2K. But against all odds, Bryan fought for his dreams, then his dreams fought for him, and then would you believe it? He was back in the mid-card, losing a lot. But just days before Survivor Series, much like when AJ Styles dethroned Jinder Mahal in 2017, the unthinkable happened. A Daniel Bryan heel turn and title win on the go-home SmackDown before Survivor Series meant that AJ Styles versus Brock Lesnar was now off the table, and Brock versus Bryan, a match that the latter had been dreaming of for quite some time, was very much on. Despite only having 5 days to prepare, the Beast and the GOAT managed to put on a match that will be talked about for years to come. And Bryan took Brock to the limit as far as he possibly could, despite a slow and rather worrying start, until eventually Brock would get the win. To even say that sentence in a year that started where Daniel Bryan was retired and Brock Lesnar was imminently heading to UFC is absolutely mind-blowing, and that is why this is one of the most remarkable matches in WWE history. So that's it. That's 15 matches you won't believe happened in 2018. Have we missed any? We probably have. We always bloody do. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and share. Hit the old subscribe button if you haven't already. If you want to read the original article for this piece, head over to whatculture.com/WWE. That's by Michael Hamflett. It's a bloody good read. And if you just want some more videos, there should be 2 over there somewhere. I'm Adam Nicholas, and I'll see you next time.